Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Steph Sample, CEO and founder of Fundid. Fundid is redefining how small businesses understand and access capital. Steph, I'm so excited to have you on the show today, not only to understand you as a founder and the growth that you've seen not only your company have, but you as an individual as well, but also this whole kind of ecosystem around small businesses as they're becoming even more and more. I think we've seen a trend in people wanting to be involved in small businesses, whether it's locally or even internationally or globally, just helping others who are building or creating really unique things to give them patronage and kind of foster the ecosystem. But there's obviously a huge problem with finance and capital as you're growing and building a small business that I think is imperative to the success of it. And I'm so excited to hear about how Fundid is helping them address that and also how they're helping businesses grow and scale over time. But before we get into all that with Fundid, what were you doing before you started the company?
Great question. I was a small business owner. So I became a small business owner right out of college, actually in college still. So at 22. So I've been doing all sorts of small businesses for the last 15 years. I've been in franchises, bought companies, started them from scratch, sold them, all of it.
Wow. And thinking about that whole experience around small businesses, I'm assuming it was a very intimate kind of customer relationship. And how do you build that as a small business? Say if you have a product or service that people have to meet you at versus it's a little bit different when you're selling something that's online because it's a little bit easier to distribute. It comes with its own challenges, of course. But for other small business out there, how do you essentially kind of tackle gaining customers, retaining customers, and thinking about growing a business and doing that efficiently and successfully?
Yeah. I mean, I've seen so many different approaches, but the one thing I love about small business owners is it's so relational. So your first customers, you usually already know them, right? Like you're really good at a thing, say marketing. Everyone in your community knows you're good at marketing. And you put out your shingle and say, hey, I'm going to now do this for other people. Generally, those first customers know you. And so that ability to use network effects and those happy customers telling others, it's actually a great way to grow a business. And so many small businesses aren't looking to, be billion-dollar companies. So that's a really sustainable way to grow. I would say, if anything, like learning how to grow where you have to be at scale, venture back, that kind of thing is so much harder than small business growth.
Yeah, and thinking about just the relational aspect, and I think a lot of small business owners may have some anxiety thinking about retaining customers and keeping that level of service high. And what are some ways that you've seen small business owners do so successfully in kind of this whole retention piece, which is huge? You gain customers, but then keeping them around. What do I need to do? What do I need to focus on? What do I need to measure in the event so I can see what's working and what's not working?
Sure. I mean, what's so great is just being a good human goes a long way in being a small
Yeah.
business owner. But I think though, it's like we all know in a basic way, be a good human, be reasonable. But then when it's like your business and you're stressed about finances or you're stressed about payroll or your business is barely making it, it's really easy to start making some really dumb decisions. Like when a customer's not happy, like digging in your heels and trying to like retain them against their will versus trying to find the common denominator and solution. So like I say it and it's like be a good human and you'll figure it out. But I also understand the flip side of it of like the stress of being a business owner and how it leads you to not be just a reasonable
Yeah.
person. But I do think like, especially small business ownership, because it's so small, like how you were saying, like it's so intimate, you usually are a phone call away from your customer. It's even more important to just be a great communicator, talk to your customers, make them feel like they can come to you and talk to you about problems, and then trying to find a common solution. That will go so far, not just retention, right? But then
Yeah.
that also leads to them recommending you to other potential customers.
Yeah.
But it seems so simple. I get it,
Yeah.
but I think it's magic.
Yeah, yeah. And thinking about, I think one thing I'm particularly interested about in terms of the small business aspect and that kind of dynamic is finding important things like pricing and what people are really able to in terms of like the value that they want to, or that they kind of value your product or your service at, and finding where that common ground is. Because I think a lot of small businesses may not investigate a little bit more so ways that they can maximize the value that they're giving to their customer, but also the return on that value and how they feel that it is the appropriate amount that they feel is worth that product or service. How have you seen companies do so successfully? and in terms of ways that they can evaluate not only how much they should price their product, good, or service, but also maybe loyalty programs and things around that. What have you seen successful? And what have you seen that, isn't so successful in that ecosystem?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple things here that I see. So small businesses with service companies, that's like a very unique individual. They tend to underprice themselves. And because it's an interesting mindset, it's this idea of like back to the marketer. I'm a really good marketer. I'm going to put out my shingle and do it on my own now. And so often the line you hear from small business owners is like, if I could just make X, then I would make the same amount in my job. And so if you think about it, a lot of super small business owners, especially sole proprietors, all they're really trying to do is make the same amount they did at whatever job they were at, but on their own. And so they say like, oh, I could be $40 an hour because then I would only have to work 20 hours a week and I'd make the same as I did before. I think that's wrong. It's not selling your value correctly. It's not building in the overhead costs of the upkeep of clients and retention and stuff, but it's how people usually start and then they evolve over time and price differently. The other side of that on the product side, especially in super tiny businesses, which is who we serve at Fundid. So let's flip over to like the Etsy owner. You'll see them a lot of times price based on material costs. And because these are usually like side hustles, or they have a hard time factoring in the cost of their time. So they'll think, oh, I'm building this product, a candle, let's say, and all my material costs were $9. I'm going to charge $15. I'm so excited. I can't believe I made money. But then they never factored in the time it actually took them to make that candle. But, at the end of the day, like all those things are like good to think about and look at. But so much of pricing comes down to the market, right? Like if you have a competitor selling something similar and they're undercutting you, you either have to be able to like really clearly show how you add additional value or you end up being dragged down to that pricing too. It's a hard one to overcome though, especially for these tiny businesses, because if you think about it, very few of them are using like solid data to figure out their pricing. So you could, as a business owner, be competing against someone else that isn't even making money and they don't even realize it yet. That is like the market in which you have to price yourself against. Or tech companies, I'm sure they're so annoying to small business owners, right? Like we've got to be the most annoying competitors out there where we literally like knowingly lose money on things and undercut these other businesses, probably providing them at not even that high of a margin.
Yeah. It's so fascinating thinking about the analytics of figuring out your pricing against the market. And I mean, what you said, that was a huge triggering point where it's like, you might even be comparing yourself to somebody else who's undervaluing their product or their service and not operating at an efficient pricing as well. So that's a fascinating kind of, I guess like reality of it because of what small business owners have to do to really understand the value of what they're serving. And speaking of the small business owner and small business owner and what their experience is, talk about Fundid. What inspired you? Obviously, you were a small business owner. I'm sure you were met with some challenges that inspired you as well. But what else was kind of a catalyst for focusing your attention solely on Fundid and building a platform that really enables and supports small business owners to build successful businesses? What was the inspiration behind it, and what was the initial problem you were looking to solve?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, I've been a business owner for 15 years. Being a business owner always has unique challenges and everyone's met with a different set. It doesn't matter who you are. There's challenges, right? I was coming into COVID. I had exited a brand that I had built to one of the larger owners in a franchise concept. So I was found myself with time on my hands. Not a lot. I had actually 2 other businesses at the time too, but more time than I've been used to. And COVID was going on. And there were all these articles in the news about the tiniest businesses being left out. If you'll remember, the first round of the PPP loans were not available to sole proprietors. There was a lot of talk about how the tiniest businesses didn't even have a chance to get that funding. And I just remember I'd already had a nonprofit that I was doing that was helping women entrepreneurs, which is something I've always been passionate about. And then watching what was going on in the news to the smallest businesses. And it just kind of had this feeling of like, to serve this problem, you have to have people that are just like diehards about the purpose of it, not not people trying to build companies to be profitable. I think there's a profitable solution here, but I really care about this segment. And so I don't want to sit on the sidelines. I want to be part of the solution. I want to see if there's a way in which we can help these tiny businesses. And I really didn't know how. Like, I know for 100% sure, I've never in my life wanted to be a tech founder. I've never even wanted the title founder. I always thought it was like silly as a business owner, all these like people running around calling themselves founders. And I'm like, what is that? Or I definitely wasn't like the biggest fan of the venture world. Like, I would make fun of it all the time. But yeah, which is hilarious. So when I started talking to my network about like, how do you serve the smallest businesses? What have you learned? What are the challenges? Because turns out there's a lot of great reasons why small businesses are so hard to fund, like really good reasons.
Wow.
So it's not that someone was just like being like, oh, we just don't care about them. It's challenging. So when I really started having those conversations, I realized it has to be done at scale because it's low margin. And to do things at scale, you do it through technology. So I'm kind of an accidental tech CEO. Let's not even call me a founder. Like, let's laugh when we say founder with my name. But yeah, it was just like the right path to try to solve this problem. So it's the path I ended up taking.
Yeah, I love the accidental tech founder, haha, CEO, because it is pretty much a lot of founders on the show have been in a similar experience where they're running, they see this problem in the market and they realize tech is just the solution because of it's low operating cost. It's something that you can do online or have on a cloud, and it's becoming more and more accessible to give resources through technology. And I want to come back on that, but for a second, I'd love to get some context. What were you've mentioned that some good reasons why companies don't fund or help small businesses. And what are those reasons? And have you seen ways that small businesses can kind of prepare themselves so that they have a better chance at accessing those resources? So I know two questions there,
Yeah.
but what are some of the common reasons why it is rightly so that they can't be supported, but also what are some ways that they can prepare themselves to find support?
Yep. Yeah. Well, the first thing is that our financial system was not built to fund without assets, specifically in commercial lending. So if you look at the banks out there, they're always lending against some assets. So if you don't have an asset, usually a home to leverage, you're already out of the market. And that includes the SBA. Like, let's be real here and acknowledge that we all think the SBA is the lender that is like the one that serves the overlooked and underserved. They are not doing loans without you leveraging a home. So if you don't have a home, you're still left out and underserved. So it's like the system was built that way. We believe that assets are the way in which to extend risk to an individual. The other thing is that a lot of the new businesses being started are asset light. So it's like, okay, so that you do have an asset to leverage and you are able to get a loan for ongoing capital that doesn't involve continuing to leverage your personal home and your personal credit, you have to have a business in which the banking system values you as an asset that you're building. So if you think about it, if the majority of small businesses in the US that are under $1 million in revenue are professional services, we're talking about 26 million businesses that don't have, because professional services, sometimes you could argue that your contract is an asset or whatever. But the reality is in all those contracts, there's a clause that says, if you are to sell your business, we have the right to maybe cancel our contract.
Wow.
So the idea to evaluate those businesses as something that is sellable is really hard. In the US, we still have a lot of limited cash flow based lending. So a lot of like the community banks and all of those, they aren't looking at cash flow as a way to extend capital to those businesses. So then the hard truth that I've learned is what small business owners can do today. I mean, of course, Fundid is here to solve this. We believe that bringing together both data and behavior is a big part of the solution. But in today's environment, where that's not as common and not available, what small business owners can do is realize that their personal credit score matters. No one told me that, right? That would have been really good to know as a 22-year-old thinking about starting a business. Like, oh, hey, like I might actually check what my credit score is, do some kind of credit building product for me personally, because in early days of businesses, that's all the financial system really has to go off of is that individual's credit worthiness. And so it's like, oh, interesting. I would have thought as a new business owner that there was some sort of score I should care about that's related to my business. But that's not actually the case. And even today, there are now like credit building products for businesses. But like the truth is no one actually uses those. Like, like show me a lender that lends
Yeah, yeah,
solely off of some business credit score that's some arbitrary thing that I'm
yeah,
sure that credit bureaus would hope we all adopt, but we have not. So your personal credit matters and capital is really important. So thinking about the business you're trying to create and knowing if you really do have that kind of capital or access to it is super important.
yeah.
There are,
Are
of course, other ways, but it's hard.
yeah, are small businesses typically doing it with just liquid cash or lines of credit? What are some of the ways that they're able to work around it, even to just survive or even
Yep,
extend their ability to service their customers? Because the transaction
sure.
cycles aren't always immediate. They might take a month, they might take 2 months. The sales
I
cycle is a long
know.
process. Yeah.
I know it's so painful. I mean, it's like, I talk about it so bluntly, but this is like so painful to me. And what I'm like, I've set my whole life around trying to solve this for them because there aren't a lot of good solutions. Most small businesses are funding their business with their existing customers and their personal finances. The great thing about being ultra small is you really can get a long way off of one customer. Like it's almost like if let's go back to marketing, you're a great marketer, you have a friend that wants to hire you for their company, and you could calculate, okay, if they hire me and I could get $5,000 a month, it's worth quitting my job for it. And then I could figure out my next customer. You really can bootstrap it in that way. And that's great. But yeah, personal finances are a really big deal. Lines of credit, you actually usually can't get early on. Like they're
Yeah.
looking for revenue and 9 months in business. Um, there are like, I think CDFIs, which are an alternative lender, are really great. And then there's alternative capital lenders out there, but they're high interest and the cost of capital is really high when you're new in being a business owner. So you really are like having to be in a place where you're willing to bet on yourself and know that like, okay, I'm okay with this cost of capital today because I know the cost of capital in the future will be lower.
Yeah. And describe Funded and how you're kind of servicing the small business owner, the ecosystem, and really how you're able to give them the capital that they need in non-traditional ways that they've been having access to before. Describe the product a little bit and how you're solving that problem for small business owners.
Absolutely. So at Funded, we're solely focused on micro businesses, which are defined as businesses with under 10 employees. That accounts for the majority of small businesses, actually. It's actually crazy that 26 million of the 32 million small businesses in America have under 10 employees, yet there are so few solutions for this segment. So then the first and foremost way we solve for this audience is that it's all we're focusing on and it's all we'll ever focus on because it's such an important part of our mission and what we want to accomplish in the world. How we do it, one is just focusing on it, but two ways today. So the first product we launched is a free platform for any small business owner where they could come on and find grants, so business grants and business capital and resources that they qualify. We recognize that business grants are actually a great solution for the tiniest, newest businesses,
Yeah.
and yet they're really hard to find and it's kind of a disaster. So we built the marketplace to make it searchable and easy to find those grants, give the business owner the information they need on those grants to know if they qualify, and then show them how to apply for those. So that's been really cool. And then in our lending marketplace, we partner with lenders that specifically are looking to serve this audience, which means we're actually partnered with a lot of nonprofit lenders or CDFIs that are lending off of some social mission over it being like a financial model. So with that, we're able to get interest rates down lower. We're able to get a credit score requirements lower. We're able to get new businesses through. So we tried to like uniquely create a marketplace around where these businesses are so they aren't wasting their time applying for things they would never qualify for. And then as of January, so just a couple months ago, we launched our first financial product that's our own, which is our business building card. So our card product, which is a business card, charge card, sorry, we see as the on-ramp into business finance for these businesses. So we kind of view it as we're building their very first true business financial product, and that highly likely this user is using our personal credit card and then switching to ours. The product, what makes us unique is that we'll underwrite and give this product out to brand new businesses and all formation types, including sole proprietors, which is new businesses and sole props are like the two segments no one wants to touch.
Yeah.
That's really what we're building this product for.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the traction. How many businesses have you been able to help up to now? And then what's particularly exciting about the next kind of milestones that you're seeing ahead of this year and in the years to come?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have 30,000 people in our community that we're helping find grants, capital, and everything for. We have 14,000 people on our business building card wait list. And then we're slowly onboarding right now. So we are just now inviting people from our wait list to convert to card holders. Like I said, we just launched the product. So we're eager to get it in market, but also eager to learn and create a better product alongside of our users and figure out how to add the most value to them. Over this next year, we're focused on two things. One, getting our wait lists onto the product, of course, but more than that is getting the product right for the segment. The most exciting thing about inviting people on is the ability to learn from them and really understand what are these business owners' pain points, and specifically in finance, and how can we create our product roadmap around solving those for them? So I think we're in a learning phase. The thing I complain about all the time is I care so deeply about this segment, right? I care about them. I didn't really care about being a tech founder. I love being an entrepreneur, but it just kind of feels like never enough. We have to do better. Our product's at the start line, and I'm just really looking forward to the day where I feel super proud of the way we're serving them. And we still have a long ways to go before I could really say I'm proud.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges that Funded faces today?
Oh, endless. I mean, we're in the craziest market ever. No, I think, there, like I said, there's a lot of good reasons why small businesses are hard to serve. The margin's really low. You have to do it at scale, at volume. I would say the sentiment of the investor market right now is they're looking for easy hits. I would say this is not an easy hit. This is a long-term scalable solution. So that's challenging. But honestly, I think getting the word out there, finding these small businesses a challenge, not because we aren't good at it. We are good at it, but because there's so many businesses that start every single day. And the day before, they knew nothing about business finance. So it's
Okay.
how do we make sure that they have the information they need? We just want to make sure word gets out and that they get the right help that they need. And then we're a tiny team. We're doing all of this with 7 people, 7 really passionate, awesome people, but still we're a tiny team trying to serve a lot of people at once. So trying to figure out how to prioritize our time, how to prioritize our roadmap. It's all challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. And if everything goes, what's the long-term vision for Funded?
Yeah. Ultimately, we want to redefine how small businesses access capital. What that means to us is we want to change an entire industry of how they view this, not just a segment of people that happen to come onto our platform and happen to use our card. So long term, we hope to come up with a solution that a lot of people can use to help all the new small business owners, not just the people that are partnering with us.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I love this next section. I call it my founder FAQs. And I'm going to give you some rapid fire questions and we'll see where we go. But first question is looking into your background, and there's a couple of things that you pointed out that I think are just challenges that any founder would face in similar positions. You're a non-technical founder, you come from a non-banking background, but being that there's so much access to information and resources, what has led to the success with Funded thus far? Is it something internally, personally that you're extremely good at, or is it access to new technology? What in particular helped you kind of overcome what a lot of people would stop them from, say, starting a tech company? But in your case, it almost, I don't know, inspired you or propelled you forward into that. What would you attest to the ability to overcome kind of the non-traditional aspects of being a founder, but moving on and servicing a customer and a client that you're particularly, I think, intimately and as an expert, have a lot of knowledge around?
Yeah. Well, I think you just hit it. I know this audience better than most people do. It's been my community my whole professional life.
Yeah.
And it happens like 98% of all women-owned businesses do have under 10 employees. And I'm not sure if you've like surveyed the fintech scene, but there's not a lot of like women like me doing this in it.
Yeah.
So I uniquely know this audience. And I'm able to speak to them and meet them where they're at. Like I think our content speaks their language, it's guiding, it's helpful, it's encouraging. That I think that's really important. Like we work really hard to not be a tech company, to make sure our website feels warm and inviting and that the
Yeah.
people on it feel supported. But we are really good content marketers. I will say that that is unique about our company.
Yeah.
And we actually all of our user signups, well, actually mostly all, not all anymore, come from organic search.
Wow. It's impressive. And thinking about content and being at the stage your company is, what has been successful and what has been not successful in the early stage for other founders out there who are testing different kind of strategies around content and marketing and getting that level of interest from people who have, like you said, no clue on even business finance as a function of small businesses, but also funded and the resources. What has been successful and what has not been so successful in terms of strategies around marketing?
Yeah, I was just reflecting on this. While it was super nice to start marketing early and to raise our seed off of that success, it was also a waste of money. I
Good.
kind of regret it in some ways. Like we had to spend a lot of money over the last year where we could have just focused on building a product and had our heads down and been off the map. So pros and cons of that, but I think that there's something like comforting when you know your marketing's working. So
Yeah.
that's what I did. And that's my background. So I spent a lot on marketing to build up a good brand. Maybe I should have focused more on the product. I don't know. Like to be
Yeah.
determined if that was smart or not. One of the biggest mistakes I made was I didn't have a technical co-founder or an in-house technical team. I used an outsourced team. By far, that was my biggest mistake. I would, if I could do it over, I would never do it that way again. I didn't know, like I wasn't
Yeah.
from this world. So it will for sure be my biggest lesson. I think we've solved that now. But definitely biggest mistake was I should have had a technical team from day one.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it works so many different ways. But the whole building the team and finding the right people to not only build and be passionate about the product, but also accomplish the milestones and be almost accountable, right, for that what they need to accomplish. But I'm thinking about back. I think I asked a question earlier, and I'm curious even more so in terms of preparation and ways that small business owners can either think about parts of their business in a certain way so that they can communicate it, kind of configuring their story, understanding their brand. What are some ways that small business owners can prepare themselves to, like I think I asked, access capital or access these resources so that they become, rather than a risky investment, but one that may have light assets, but and reasonably has a lot of future promise and potential revenue that they can earn? What are some ways small business owners
Sure.
can prepare themselves and communicate
Yeah.
that to lenders?
Yeah. I mean, again, your personal credit matters. I was a small business owner, so watching your personal credit really matters. And one thing I do want to call out is so many small business owners aren't actually looking to grow. That's like the interesting thing about being now in something that's venture backed, but serving small business owners. I feel like I always have to explain that to investors specifically of like, they aren't trying to get to $1 billion. They're like trying to have a job. But I think in accessing capital, one thing that helped me early on, I was not a finance major, but I always owned my business finances. I learned, I watched videos. It is so important to being lendable. Like you have to be able to talk intelligently about your business finances. It's a horrible thing to outsource, especially in the early days, because you just learn so much. You learn about what you're spending money on that you shouldn't. So I'm a really big believer in like managing your own finances and not outsourcing it in the early days for the super small business owner.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. Thinking about you as a founder and you kind of day to day, what's particularly hard about your job?
Oh, everything. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding. I've had a blast. My job is really hard emotionally, decision wise. There's very real consequences to the decisions I make. But at the end of every day, I generally go home and say, like, I really think what I'm doing is cool. I'm learning a lot. I'm working with really intelligent, awesome people. I love my community. I love my investors. So I have a lot that's super positive, but there's just this emotional burden of being a founder and CEO in a world that is incredibly lonely It feels like you carry the weight of your decisions, not only for yourself, but for your investors, for your employees. I really care about all of these people in my life. And so I think carrying that burden on behalf of the team it's a lot for me. It's really draining.
Yeah, yeah. And thinking about the founder experience and what you have to do kind of day to day, what's something I would like to ask this question? Because I think every founder has an answer to this, but what's something you spend too much time on and what's something that you would like to spend more time on?
Sure. I think I spend too much time asking people for money and building like investor relations. I have amazing investors. I love it, but it really is like, especially coming from being a small business owner where I spent none of my time on that. I can look at my life over the last 15 years and see how it's more productive building a company than having to always like be selling this idea of the company. Um, yeah. So something I wish I could spend more of my time on is, well, it's specific to right now, is the technical side. I've found it really fascinating. I've never been around engineers before, but there's all these things that they do that are so interesting to me and so aligned with how I'm programmed, whether it be, I don't know, like all of their different systems and processes. I don't know. I just think that part is really cool and the structure of it. The idea of like how to build an efficient product roadmap and make decisions is super interesting to me. But of course, like the real answer is that's not an efficient use of my time either. I just find it interesting. I need to be able to spend more of my time on being more strategic and long-term thinking and figuring out how to bring that long-term vision into monthly actions.
Yeah.
And it's just so hard because you get so busy, you sit in so many Zoom. And then if you do have time in your calendar, it almost feels selfish to use it for thinking and being strategic.
Yeah.
So I really need to be better at that.
Yeah, yeah. Switching between the operation and task orientation versus kind of taking a step back and look at the long-term vision and the value set and thinking about the direction of that everyone needs to go in is I feel like an underserved part of building a company but the most necessary when you're thinking about where you're going and where you're headed. And I'm glad you said that because I feel like a lot of founders, they acknowledge it, but it needs to be more spoken up about. And so interesting to hear your perspective on that. I always like to ask this question because I love how founders kind of ingest knowledge and take knowledge and extract knowledge from anything that they find and read and observe. But what's something, whether you think back early in your career or even now, what are books or people that have influenced you the most?
Oh, that's so interesting. So, well, people, for sure, my husband. So, my husband became an entrepreneur at a really young age when he took over his family business, made it his own, and then went and built it. And he's one of the best leaders I've ever been around. He cares so deeply about people. He's such a great operator. And we've mostly talked about business for 17 years together.
Oh.
And I've mostly learned a lot from him because he's my opposite. His skill set is very different than mine. Books and stuff, I'm actually not super big into books, especially that tell you how to do things, because I think the entrepreneur journey is so unique and is such a journey in general. But I did recently read The Obstacle is the Way and The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is unusual that I just read 2 books. So like, I don't normally do that. I thought those are really interesting. I love the idea of The Obstacle in the Way in particular, the idea of leaning into hard times and spinning them in your favor and figuring out the best path through. But the thing that stuck out to me the most about that book was essentially it's like all these chapters that are about leaning into hard things and overcoming them. But then at the very end of the book, there's this chapter on kind of this idea of God willing, or I guess I would say like releasing it to the universe.
Yeah.
Of this idea that you could do everything right, like lean into every obstacle. But there's this element that none of us could put our finger on that we maybe call luck that is at play too. Right. And so that's the thing I think specifically for founders and CEOs, like knowing that is what allows us to sleep at night. Because if that weren't true, there's just so much stress to always carry.
Yeah, yeah. That's so well said. I always like to make sure we before we obviously we're coming to the close of the episode, but before we end and ask for all of your where to find you and things like that, I always like to ask this question: is there any question that I didn't ask you, or anything that you would have wanted me to ask you? Anything come to mind at all?
I don't think so. I think maybe understanding small businesses in the US because it's really fascinating. So some things I always like to share is that there's 32, 33 million small businesses in the US. And that's a very vague, loose term because a lot of us would argue the ones on the higher end are large businesses. Yeah. Of those, the majority, over 80%, have under 10 employees. 73%, I know, and 73% are sole proprietors. So the US economy is built on tiny, tiny businesses that are constantly overshadowed by magical giant companies. But it's not our economy. Our economy really is built on small businesses. And these people generally are solving a problem they have or utilizing a skill set they have. And one thing that I always think is super fascinating about small business owners is this idea of necessity entrepreneurship. So when you look at women-owned businesses, it like it was like the entirety of women-owned businesses do under $1 million in revenue, like 98%. So almost the entire market. But when you ask women small business owners how they got into it, more than any other case, it's usually from some sort of necessity. Either the existing corporate world of America pushed them out of the job market when they had kids. And so in order to accommodate being a caretaker, they had to create their own job. Or they saw a problem that they went to solve, but seldomly do they say that they've always wanted to be a business owner. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, it's so fascinating thinking about how just the volume of small business owners and also the circumstances that lead them into. And a lot of people think like people make a choice and they see something in the market, they're super passionate about it, but oftentimes it's like, I have this problem, it needs to be solved, nobody else can do it, so I'm going to throw myself into it and invest so much time and resources into. But it's also inspiring for those who are maybe even dealing with those challenges to hear that other people are doing it and I can do it which is very empowering. And I love that. Last little bit is, where can we find you? Where can we find Fundid? Tell us all your plugs. I know we're coming to the close, so let us know as an audience where we can support you. Give us your LinkedIn's, Twitter's, websites. Where can we find and support not only Fundid, but you, Steph, as a founder or CEO?
Cool.
Sorry.
Well, that's right. So Fundid, you can find us online at getfundid.com. It's GETFUNDID. Of course, Fundid is on all the social channels. For me, I'm only on LinkedIn. I don't do social otherwise. So that's really easy. And Stefanie Sample on LinkedIn.
Amazing, Steph. It's so amazing learning about your experience as a small business owner, what led you to build Fundid, how you're building Fundid, and what your mission and your drive is about the problem that you're solving and giving people access. And it's exciting, especially hearing the volume of small business owners, the impact that Fundid can have in a huge market and in the different resources you're allowing them to have. So Steph, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. I hope you enjoyed yourself on Behind Company Lines, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Of course.